The clock is ticking down to a massive Canada-wide rail shutdown. While facing calls to intervene in negotiations, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau instead urged parties to reach an agreement for the sake of Canadians and Canadian businesses.
My message is very straightforward. It is in the best interest of both sides to continue doing the hard work at the table to find a negotiated resolution. Millions of Canadians, of workers, of farmers, of businesses right across the country are counting on both sides to do the work and get to a resolution.
The two rail lines play a huge role in the Canadian economy. CN and CP move roughly $1 billion worth of goods per day. For the federal government's response, I'm joined by Labour Minister Steven MacKinnon. Hello, sir. Thanks for coming on.
Hello, JP.
So business groups across the country and even in the U.S. are demanding the federal government step in to prevent a work stoppage. Will you do anything to stop the railways from going dark?
We believe in collective bargaining, and we believe that enduring business results, enduring results for Canadian workers come at the bargaining table. And the people that aren't represented, of course, at these bargaining tables in many of these federally regulated industries are those that are among, of course, that feel the impact. So farmers, apparently we have a bumper crop across Canada on the prairies, for example, this year. Commuters, Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, miners, people, forestry workers. I have forestry workers in my riding. These people, in some cases, are days away from layoffs. Of course, people with investments, small businesses. These are all people who don't have a voice at this table, but who rely very much on the work that's being done here. So I'm here to communicate to the parties that they have a responsibility that goes way beyond the interests that they may have on their own. And as Labour Minister, I'm here to remind them that there's very much a public interest in what they're doing, and making sure that they realize that as they go about their work.
So what will you do to serve the public interest then if there isn't a deal at the table, if there isn't some sort of resolution? Because as you say, hundreds of millions of dollars of goods won't be delivered. Retailers could face shortages, especially I was reading today, things like meat and fruit coming from the U.S. That will not come through. Commuters in Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, tens of thousands of people potentially looking at long delays to get to work. There's a lot on the line here, Minister. What are you prepared to do about it if they can't get a deal?
Well, there sure is. This is very high stakes for the people involved, but high stakes for the people who aren't represented at this table. So I've reminded these parties that they have this responsibility. I need to be satisfied that they take that responsibility seriously. I've not been satisfied to date with the urgency that they've brought to the task at hand. Look, these are profitable businesses, and these are companies that rely on federal regulation to continue to operate. At the same time, unions have a requirement and a responsibility to their members because at the end of the day, no one likes a labor disruption, no one likes a lockout, no one likes a strike, and these folks all have a duty to their respective stakeholders to get a deal. And when I see a lack of urgency, it's time to step in. It's time to remind these parties that they have responsibilities to themselves, responsibilities to their stakeholders, and responsibilities to the whole country.
Who's responsible for the lack of urgency? Are you blaming the companies?
Well, look, these folks have had a lot of time. The collective agreement expired at the end of 2023. They've been at the table since November of last year. And this is obviously not a pace or a pace of progress that is acceptable to Canadians in such a sensitive industry. So again, we've been reminding the company and reminding the union that they have a duty to get on with the work. And the people are here, they're doing the work. They're accompanied by the best mediators in the business, the people who work for the Federal Mediation Service. It's time to get a deal. And what I've said is, why not today? There's going to be a deal. So get a deal today.
CN asked you last week to direct the Canadian Industrial Relations Board to lead binding arbitration, something that could have prevented further labor action, but you didn't go that route. Why did you not go ahead with binding arbitration? Are you regretting that? Because now there's a great deal of uncertainty.
This government believes in collective bargaining. Collective bargaining is a tried and true method of ensuring not only prosperity for Canadian companies and safe and prosperous working conditions for Canadian workers, but it's helped build this country over many, many decades. It works. But it works when people put the work in that is required to get a deal, to make those compromises at the table. And those are the most enduring results. And that's our plan. That's the only plan.
Your predecessor, though, Seamus O'Regan, ordered binding arbitration just a few weeks ago with WestJet mechanics. It seems like, arguably there's a lot more at stake with a possible rail stoppage. Why was it okay to use it in that case, but not in this one?
No two situations are the same. Without getting into all of the details, that was a first collective agreement for a new representative of those employees. Much different set of circumstances. And I think Mr. O'Regan defined his tenure as my other predecessors have defined their tenures in defending collective bargaining and ensuring that the positive results that come out of collective bargaining are felt by Canadian businesses and Canadian workers.
Are you reluctant to impose binding arbitration because of the NDP? Because I know the Labour critic for that party, Matthew Green, had a letter out to you saying, do not go ahead with binding arbitration. Did that play a role? Are you listening to your supply and confidence partner on this one?
I'm listening to Canadians. I'm listening to, I'm meeting premiers, I'm meeting business associations, I'm meeting agricultural associations. Those are the people I'm listening to. Those are the voices that I seek to represent when I speak to the parties involved in this dispute. Those people have a real stake in the outcome here, and they have a stake in achieving a successful set of agreements, both at CN and CPKC. We are focused on that and that alone.
If there is not a successful agreement, though, and there is strike action, are you prepared to reconvene Parliament and pass back to work legislation?
I'm not going to get into what ifs. The parties have to understand one thing very clearly, that it is in their hands, that the stakes are high, that Canadians are counting on them, that businesses are counting on them, that unionized Canadian workers in other workplaces are counting on them, commuters are counting on them, farmers are counting on them. These people need to understand very, very clearly that it is their duty to get a deal.
But are you prepared to invoke back to work legislation? This government has done it before with Canada Post, so you could absolutely, in theory, do it again in this case.
Well, Parliament isn't sitting, JP, and it's time for these parties to get very, very serious about getting a deal at the negotiating table.
Matt Jones, Alberta's Minister of Jobs, Economy and Trade, has been quite critical of all of this and the government's handling of it. He says a rail shutdown will mean Canada's, quote, reputation as a country that can supply the world with energy and food will be irreparably harmed. What do you say to him?
Well, what I would say is that collective bargaining works. Collective bargaining works in Alberta. Collective bargaining works across Canada, and it's achieved very, very positive results over decades. So we're saying to the parties, and I know Mr. Jones is responsible for collective bargaining in his province under provincial jurisdiction. I'm sure he'd agree. We want to get a deal that's satisfactory for all parties, satisfactory for Canadian workers, satisfactory for the railways involved, and of course, all of the people who depend on them.
And are you concerned that there will not be a deal, sir? I mean, just be straight with Canadians. Is there a backup plan? Are you prepared for something if this does go awry?
Well, of course, the Government of Canada is always prepared for any eventuality, but that does not mean that we are not putting 100% into our energy into ensuring these parties have all of the services, all of the efforts needed to facilitate getting to an agreement. And that's why I'm in Calgary right now. That's why I was in Montreal yesterday, and that will continue to animate all of the work that I'm doing.
All right, thank you. Labour Minister Steven MacKinnon, appreciate you coming on, sir.
Thanks, JP.
Millions of Canadians, of workers, of farmers, of businesses right across the country are counting on both sides to do the work and get to a resolution.
The country has no patience with dilly-dallying right now. They can achieve a deal. They need to get a deal done.
The Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister laying out the stakes as the clock ticks down to a massive work stoppage, a possible massive work stoppage at two of Canada's biggest rail freight companies. CN and CP say contract negotiations with unionized workers are at a standstill, and the union representing CP workers has issued a strike notice that would also go into effect early tomorrow morning. The Labour Minister is encouraging the companies and the unions to reach a deal, but he has not imposed a binding arbitration process. It's time to bring in the power panel. Jonathan Kalis is a former Quebec advisor to Prime Minister Trudeau, and here with me in studios is Tim Powers, a former strategist for Conservative parties, and Jordan Likeness is a former NDP strategist. Thanks for coming on, guys. Nice to see you. Happy Wednesday? Happy Wednesday.
Only Wednesday.
Only Wednesday. Okay, don't get ahead of myself here. Jonathan, so a huge strike looming, something that could cripple the national economy if it does go through. We're just hours away from that possible strike action or a lockout. The government so far refusing binding arbitration, something that could stop this work stoppage. Why are they holding off, do you think? Is it because of pressure from the NDP and pro-union voices around them?
I don't think that they're fearing an NDP backlash. In the past 2 years, you've heard occasional threats, if you want to get that serious about them, from Jagmeet Singh that if the Liberals don't do something, we're going to use our power, I think is often his expression. But they have been empty threats until now. And I don't get the feeling that this deal is going to end because the Liberals do or don't take specific action regarding the strike or potential lockout. So I'm not sure that that's really driving them. Potential Labour voters in general, yes, they have always had a strong base amongst Labour voters, and it is the path that they would least like to take. That's not something they want to do, is force, whether it's arbitration or back to work legislation. It's not something they want to do. They haven't done in 6 years. The last time was in 2018 with postal workers. It's not their preference. In any case, they need a dancing partner if it got to legislation. So, arbitration is that in-between step. They really strongly believe in the best deals are made at the table, and they're going to let this go into the final hour. You're seeing a lot of public statements by the PM, by Chrystia Freeland, Steve MacKinnon. They need to pick up the pace. The government is putting pressure on them. I don't think that sort of idle threats, we're going to do this or that, whether it's arbitration or something else, is the way they want to go. Whether they're nodding and winking that may be a final result of no deal and a strike or lockout, maybe that's sort of behind the scenes and they don't want to say it publicly because they want the parties really to come together. So ultimately, there's no one who doesn't want a deal here. The government doesn't want to wear this. They're the government. They're going to have to an extent. Plus, they have a cabinet retreat starting on Sunday, and I don't think they want the entire narrative around that to be focused on this.
Yeah, Tim, I mean, the government in theory could put this to an end tonight, right? They could impose or direct the two parties to go to binding arbitration. They're deciding not to let that happen. They're sort of allowing the drama to ramp up a bit, if you will. Do you think it's because the NDP has come out against binding arbitration, or is it, as Jonathan says, a concern about Labour? I mean, they have been courting union voters. They kind of need those in their camp. Is it a reluctance to act because of some of these Labour voices?
Oh, they're clearly terrified about Mr. Singh's threat.
That's
not
what's done
a chance in hell. I mean, yeah, that's not it. Look, having been involved with CN, not currently involved with CN in the past, and understanding some of the company side of this in the past, and Jordan maybe will speak to some of the Labour. Look, we're in the 100% theatrics phase at the moment for the public. None of us have any idea what's going on with the mechanics, but we can assess the theatrics. And the theatrics would suggest that maybe there's more progress being made than actually is being let on at this point. But that doesn't mean whether you're the government, you're Mr. Singh, you're the Conservatives, that you don't keep up a little bit of your own political pressure, because you all want to claim a victory after all of this. But it has more to do with the normal dance of negotiations than anything, with great respect to Mr. Singh, that he has said, though I'm sure he will claim, as every political party will claim, some victory here. The real challenge, though, is if they are close to something and it does fall apart, because then there are real problems. How long is it going to last? What is it going to do to an economy where we've just seen some dip in inflation and some positive move on some fronts on prices? This is going to screw up the supply chain royally the longer it lasts. And the real pressure will come as if the deal falls apart and there is a hesitation to use more forceful measures. So we have no idea on any of that at the moment, JP, but that will probably become clear at about 12:01 Eastern Time tonight.
Yeah, Jordan, as Tim points out, there is a lot on the line with this deal. I mean, tens of millions of dollars worth of goods, jobs are on the line, commuters in Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver. There is a lot that could happen if they don't get a deal. Do you think that this, by allowing this to happen and the government not necessarily stepping in at this point, does that kind of further the narrative that Poilievre has made frequently, that Canada is broken, if they allow this to kind of cripple the economy?
No, I don't think that that's the case at all. I mean, look, the reason that labor negotiations work is because you have faith that both sides are going to be negotiating honestly with each other. If the business community can just rely on the government to step in at the drop of a hat to legislate people back or to go to binding arbitration, then the whole system falls apart, right? So I think that beyond the politics of the issue, which I think Jonathan and Tim have touched on really, really well, there's also the practical matter of the fact that the government really doesn't have an incentive to go in and push people around at this point, other than rhetorically, because they need both sides to come to the table to make the best agreement. The workers certainly don't want to be on strike any more than the companies want them to go on strike or to lock them out. This is not something it's not a position that anybody wants to be in, and they do it with great seriousness. And so I think that what we're going to see is, as Tim has alluded to, I think there's likely more happening than what we're seeing publicly, and we'll probably see some sort of an agreement come out before the government needs to get involved.
Okay.